Time's up, Mark Carney. We've had enough. The Conservatives find ways to make their lives unpleasant all over again. And a talk about woke and what it is and what it's not. It's the Lime Podcast. This episode of the Lime Podcast is brought to you by Forestry For The Future. Canada's housing crisis demands bold, scalable solutions. Build Canada Homes is an opportunity to leverage Canadian wood in modern construction. Wood-based methods like mass timber and modular construction can significantly reduce build times, waste, and carbon emissions while supporting local economies. Expanding building codes, streamlining approvals, and prioritizing domestic wood in federal projects could double demand and foster job creation in rural and northern communities. Despite trade challenges and market volatility, a partnership between industry and government is vital to stabilize the sector, enhance competitiveness, and deliver innovative, sustainably sourced Canadian wood products for homes across Canada and abroad. With capacity growing across provinces, stable demand and predictable financing are key to unlocking the sector's potential. We need to build Canada Homes with Canadian wood. To learn more, visit forestryforthefuture.ca. Well, hello, Jen Gerson.
Why, hello. So right off the bat,
yeah, this is funny.
just gonna warn y'all that we will probably be interrupted at some and maybe several points in this podcast by my daughter. Do you want to know why, Matt?
You know what? I already know why, but you have to tell the listeners because I didn't know why, and Jen told me, and I laughed really hard.
Because after 3 weeks of no school due to the teacher strike, the boards of education here in Alberta decided that we will be maintaining the fall break. The fall break, by the way, is something that happens now.
We don't
like
have a
spring
fall
break.
Yeah, we don't have one.
Yeah, no, they started that last year. They decided that what the kids really need, and what the teachers, it was more time off.
Rest.
And what the teachers really need is more of a break. And so we decided to maintain that 1 week after a 3-week teacher strike, because of course we did.
So just as a hollow-eyed veteran of many teacher strikes in Ontario, I always love the argument used by both sides, right? The government will use it, the teachers will use it. We need these kids back in the classroom. Their education's too important to miss.
Yeah.
We got to get these kids back in the class. Every day out of the classroom has measurable negative impacts on their socialization and their education. And let's take a quick week and everybody rest up, and we'll see you next Monday.
Yeah, and that's why literally now every 2 weeks there's a PD day, and every single PD day just happens to be structured around a long weekend. So like the number of 5 and 6 day weekends has rapidly expanded in the last few years.
This is classic Naked Gun, where Leslie Nielsen says, "Not one man on this force will rest for 1 minute until we get to the bottom of this." Let's get a bite to eat.
Yeah.
Yep. So enjoy, and I hope your daughter is having a blast.
No, but let's remember, public education is crucial.
Oh, it's indispensable. Yeah, it's
indispensable. Couldn't survive without it.
Your son in private school? He's at school today?
He's at school today.
But of course. Does he have fall break, or is that just something they ignore?
You know what? I should probably no. He does have he has added a little bit more of a fall break, and I will admit, even the private schools do have a lot of PD days because they do try to line them up.
You know why they do? Teachers.
Why do
it's a race for talent, right?
Yeah,
teachers like to go where they get more days off.
No. What are you talking about? Would you suggest for a single moment, Matt, that professional days are not about maximizing the skill sets of our teachers?
Professional days are about maximizing the skill set of teachers in the same way that teachers have insisted to me that the summer is not a paid vacation. It is a chance to develop one's skills and prepare lesson plans for the coming year.
Which I'm sure they do diligently every 5 days a week for 40 hours a day, all through.
They work themselves to the bone.
To the bone.
Yeah. Remember, I'm married to one. Like the absolute delight in that last week and the absolute dawning horror the last week of vacation tells you all you need to know about how seriously the idea of an 8-week working period
holiday
is.
The other one that I always find very entertaining is, now I don't know if this is generally true. I don't know how, like, it's possible that this may be true in other teachers, but I had one teacher tell me that in all of those professional days off, not a single one had been devoted to special needs education. Like, she'd been a teacher for years and years and years and years, and she'd probably taken dozens and dozens of professional days, and not a single one had been devoted to the very special needs education that is currently, actually I use the euphemism, complicating the classroom.
You know what? They'll get around to it. It's slipped their mind. I'm sure they're going to get around to it. All right.
Look, what could a teacher possibly need to learn about? I don't know. Anyway,
it's on the list.
It's on the list.
Yeah,
hey, do you need me to scream at my kid who's playing Lego behind me, or?
Well, how about I take a minute here and just set up the podcast, and you can your microphone and
you do
the necessary parenting. So here we are. One of the things that happened this week, and it's just a statement of blindingly obvious. We know everybody's been paying attention to this. This was budget week, and the budget came out. Jen and I had our own opportunities to read it this week, but I also think it was an interesting week to bring down the budget, Jen, because by coincidence, my 6-month countdown on refusing to make up my mind about Carney expired. I think it was like last Thursday, and then we get the budget on Tuesday. So I actually held my fire. I published my column this week. I'll tell people what I wrote in my column. We can talk about that. But I have to say, I think your column was more interesting.
I was meaner.
You were meaner, but also you had previously given the prime minister more runway than I had. Yep. You had said you were going to give him more time. And in general, even though I was saying I was going to keep my powder dry, I don't think regular podcast audience will really have been in any particular doubt which way I was leaning on Carney. I say this not as a criticism. I was just surprised by your column this week because you've been the reasonable one, relatively speaking. And then a few days ago, basically, you went, I'm out.
It's incredibly hard for me to be the reasonable one, Matt. This is not my natural métier. You know, like this is not what you come to Jen Gerson for.
Until about 3 days ago. So look, do you want to get your assessment? I think was more grounded. Mine was more emotional. Classic. Well, you know what? My traditional gender roles on the Line podcast.
Well, we'll get into that
in segment 3. Yeah. My take on Carney, it's interesting, right? Because I don't have any personal problem with the guy. And, it's funny. Like, partisans are always going to go, well, you just hate him. It's like, no, I don't. I think he's an improvement over Trudeau. I genuinely do. There is not one day in the last 6 months where I've thought, oh, man, only Trudeau is still here, right? Like the country is better off with Mark Carney as prime minister than it was the 10 years Justin Trudeau was prime minister.
By far.
So also credit where it's due. Some of what Mark Carney has done, some of what he's proposing to do, I have no problem endorsing. Some of what he has done and some of what he is trying to do is good. I think some of it's stupid and bad, but whatever. It's a politician. You're never going to be perfectly happy
with what a government does.
But on balance, this is definitely a step in the right direction. I've been rolling my eyes a little bit this week because people, including some liberals, have been going, oh, how can the Conservatives vote against a conservative budget? This is not a conservative budget. And you know what? Like, and I'm trying not to laugh.
$78 billion deficit. Conservative budget. Sure.
What this is a budget that is still very clearly within the realm of the liberal part of the political spectrum, but much further to the right within that band than Justin Trudeau did. So this is a budget
shift spending away from certain things and toward other things, and those priorities that they have shifted toward maybe a little bit more conservative in their outlook. Sure.
Plus, I think, and this is again credit where it's due, Carney is focusing on the stuff that matters, that you would think any government should be focused on. But like Trudeau, Trudeau kind of gave up on the macro stuff so that he could focus on like the vote getting, Prague signaling micro stuff. Carney's putting the attention back on the macro stuff, like the basics of sovereignty, defense, economic growth, prosperity. I don't think it's going to work, and I don't think he's doing enough, but like he is at least focused on the right things. I can't even go that far about Trudeau. He was focused on the wrong stuff. And really, Trudeau had no excuse for the last 3 to 5 years. Like the world was on fire, and he's like, you know what, we need
lunch program.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like there's ballistic missiles flying all over. We have emerging AI upsetting everything that we've typically taken for granted. The Americans have gone nuts. And
but Matt, did you know that certain types of drugs will now be covered in the pharmacare plan? Only diabetes and like contraceptives, but like those two are important.
Yeah. I had heard that. Mm-hmm. I had seen that press release. So
we have a dental care program now, Matt.
What's that?
We have a dental care program for poor people now.
We do.
Important stuff.
Yeah. So Carney is an improvement over that. Also, he is a tonal improvement.
Yes.
But I think 6 months in a budget in, I'm looking at the scale of the challenges this country has. I'm looking at what Carney is offering as solutions, and the math don't math. You know, I think in normal times, I could say the Carney budget, and so far the Carney ministry, has been a step in the right direction, but it's a really timid step. And there's this great line, and I actually ripped it verbatim out of a Mike Moffat column that he published on Missing Middle. He was in the budget lockup, and he noticed when he was looking at the numbers that like the housing plan that the Liberals had announced and had run on and had talked about is now being given form in the budget, and half the money is missing. And he asked about that, and he was told, oh, don't worry, the money will still come. It's going to come later.
Well, and the money that has been allocated is mostly going to, I believe, their own public version of we're going to spend the government money to buy a bunch of prefab houses and put them in the middle of nowhere. And I'm sure that that's going to work really well.
When I read Mike's piece, and Mike's piece was not like an opinion column. It was kind of a recap of what was in it from the housing policy. But I just thought slower than anticipated is the line, or slower than expected. It's the line I grabbed on and used as the column of my headline. I don't think we're on the wrong track per se. I just think we're going really slowly down that track. So I gave the guy 6 months. At the 90-day mark, remember I wrote that column about like the 100 days? Mm-hmm. That was kind of like my midpoint check-in. Nothing I wrote, some of the details would change obviously because of announcements, but what I wrote at 100 days versus what I wrote after 6 months in a budget, it's the same.
So the budget's really interesting. You know, it's touted as a transformational budget, and yet it does two things at the same time. One, spends way too much money, and simultaneously and paradoxically not enough on the types of things that will actually make a difference. Which is interesting. There's a shifting of some of the money, and I think there's been some talk, and there will be some anger, for example, about the announcement that we're going to cut, significantly to the civil service. What I think is ignored in that is that a lot of the growth in the civil service actually came in the form of managing immigration and refugee claimants, which we all know have become a really, really significant file in the last couple of years because the country's absorbed millions of new people, some of whom we can't really totally keep track of, but that's another conversation for another day. We've taken on way too many immigrants and way too many temporary foreign workers, way more than our actual underlying economy and infrastructure can sustain.
Yep.
Which is contributing to the really high housing demand, really high housing prices. It's pretty clear that the Carney budget is moving away from that. Going to bring immigration back into control. Big cuts to immigration. Yeah. Hopefully that will ease a lot of the housing demand issues. Hopefully it will ease some of the other types of economic pressures and social pressures that have been put on some of our systems. The downside of all of that is that the reason why we were taking in so many of those immigrants is because it juiced our economic numbers. So our economic strength is going to probably decline in tandem with the immigration decline. We're not going to need the same number of public sector workers to manage a significantly cut immigration inflow.
They were doing such a bang up job until now.
And you were doing such a bang up job. So this actually is the correct answer for the particular moment and situation that we're in at the moment. And I think that part of the reason why Mike Moffat was disappointed by that funding that went into the housing numbers is because they're going to try to address the housing problem also from the demand side, not just from the supply side. And by that, they mean by significantly reducing immigration, hopefully that will ease up on a lot of the housing demand.
Yeah.
It's the only answer for us, for the country, for the state that the country's in right now. I don't think there's another solution. Again, this isn't a values conversation. It's now in the realm of a math conversation.
Correct.
It's just that math don't math. The number don't do. So this is where we're going to go. And I think it's the only answer. So look, I have no issue with that. Same thing with $9 billion to defense. Look, do you want to have a military? If you want to have a military in Canada, a significant influx of money was necessary. The military is on the verge of essentially collapse at this point, being a non-functional show of a military. I mean, we still have the cadets, but we can't send the 12-year-olds off to war. So look, if you want to have a military, if you want to have a military in this country, if you want to even have the nominal capacity to meet our alliance goals and aims, significant billions was wildly overdue. It's just, there was a crack in the foundation and now we have to spend $50,000 to get the foundation fixed because we ignored it for so long. It's expensive. There's no way around it unless you want to fold it in, which will have significant geopolitical consequences, particularly in the current moment. Some of the tweaking on the productivity measures, I think all very good. But is it going to be enough to basically turn Canada from an interconnected octopus economy into, some version of the Irish tiger? Not remotely, not even remotely. And I think that the Conservatives made some hay about this during the last week, where after the election there was a big lobbyist funded party where a bunch of Liberals showed up and drank Prosecco. And they took
the
pictures
political
of this,
party in Ottawa this week?
The political party. The Conservatives, I think, rightly made some hay on the optics of that because it's bad optics.
Oh, I did too.
But it's bad optics for a reason, because literally this is how this country is running, and what's being signaled here is that this is how this country is still running by and for lobbyists.
See, I gave it a snarky. The budget
doesn't really change that.
I gave it a snarky retweet just because 2 weeks ago, Mark Carney has a primetime address delivered in person to a bunch of young Canadians where he's telling them we're going to
have to make sacrifices.
Then record scratch. 2 weeks later, Francois Champagne is like, woo, we did it. And Carney's throwing his arms around everybody at a big party. I did tweet about that, and people have been saying to me, come on, Gurney, it's unfair. Every government throws a party after the budget.
That's completely fair.
I know, but optics, guys, this, and
also
messaging matters. And this touches on your column, Jen, because you were pointing out the idea of national moral leadership. Not that I'm what would Carney do in this situation? I don't hit the knees in prayer and ask for the strength of Mark Carney, but you've got to set the national tone, and telling the kids they have to sacrifice, and then 2 weeks later you're partying at
a lobbyist funded thing. And you also could have just gone to the bar after, like a normal human being. Most of us do that. Anyway, look,
I enjoy doing that.
There's also nothing stopping you from just hitting highs or whatever it was. I'm not saying that you have to go around in sackcloth, but come on, everyone. Anyway. And also, why do you think a lobbyist is hosting a post-election a post-budget party in the first place?
I don't know, Jen. Why?
Why? Why do you think the lobbyists,
I couldn't
professional
possibly
GR
fathom.
firms, are doing that? I mean, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, look, I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to hosting events or
we should do one at a harvest
gatherings that are funded by people who have an interest in getting stuff in the room. But let's not be naive about what the people doing the sponsorship are getting out of it, right?
Yeah, the Lions post-budget party at Kelsey's.
Yeah, exactly, right. Anyway,
So I want to, we've talked about, I think, the budget kind of here in the abstract. I want to make 2 points actually about the budget that are worth making. And then I have a question for you. One of them is, and I think it is worth flagging this. Look, I'm obviously cynical about this. I'm not wildly impressed. One thing I do like, if we pull it off, Carney is paying attention to the macroeconomic sinews of a functioning economy that we have neglected. One of the things I've been banging my drums about this for a couple of years now. We talk about all the time. We're talking about, transformative outcomes. We're going to grow the economy, jobs of tomorrow. Canada has hundreds of billions of dollars in unfunded infrastructure deficits. And that means combination of things. It means things that we need that we haven't budgeted for, things that we have begun the process for, but to which no money is attached. You see this all the time. Like, I have Toronto PTSD over, we've spent $100 million developing the intricate details of a transit line and no actual money has been committed to the project. But there's also just basic state of good repair stuff where stuff we already have is in deteriorating condition. We could sink $200 to $300 billion into the economy, borrow it all on a bond issue. I don't care. Not all debt is bad. We could raise $300 billion and literally spend it just getting the economy caught up to where it should be on basic stuff, the absolute sinews. So I do like to see some attention to that. That's good. The other comment I want to make before I ask you a question, I don't think the broader public understands how massive these defense investments are. And I just don't mean it in the sense of it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But it is also the amount of money we're talking about for the armed forces. And this is good. Be still my beating heart. But we have no plan to spend that much money, right? Because we've spent 20 years seeing we get from 1.3% to 2%. And if we had, what we could have done is fleshed out the notional force that we claimed existed but didn't. Spending 2% kind of would have made the military actually capable of doing the things it should be able to do. The kind of money we're talking about now is going to include stuff that right now our military has no ability to do. It's going to be at a scale we have not looked at in generations. And I'm excited for this. This is good news. This is what I've been calling for years. But I want the broader public to know there isn't a plan on the shelf at D&D HQ right now, which is, oh, okay, well, we got this extra money, so let's just pull this thing off the shelf and do this. We're going to have to figure out almost from scratch what we're going to do with all the money we're budgeting for defense. It's a nicer problem to have than the opposite, but it's going to be a problem.
Well, and the other thing I'd say is we haven't fixed our procurement problems either.
No,
$9 billion, for example, looks like a lot of money for defense until you realize that that's 3 very poorly procured Irving ships. Right? That's going to be the actual risk here, is that if you're throwing a lot of money into the top of the funnel, but you haven't actually figured out how to procure and manage that money, you're just going to piss it away and it becomes good money after bad, bad money after good. Anyway,
good money after
the point
bad.
Being is it's an issue. The other thing I do is want to talk about is, I do want to talk about the debt and the deficit. 2 reasons. One, whenever I see a government split operating cost and capital cost, red alert, because that is a way of tricking you into essentially hiding a deficit. How much money is actually going into spending?
Well, this deficit doesn't count. That's a capital deficit.
That's a capital deficit. We're not. That's not operating costs. We're using that to buy assets. But of course, it's an asset that you can never resell and therefore never recoup the cost from. And guess what? If you're using debt spending to spend that deficit, it doesn't matter if you're spending that money on a wage or a bridge. It's the debt's the debt. So that means that you have to pay debt servicing costs on it later. And accordingly to the own budget, I believe that by 2029, something like 13% of our revenues is just going to be going into debt servicing. So not even paying down, I believe, the principal of the debt, just servicing the debt is going to be 13% of revenue by 2029 on the current pace. And what concerns me about that is that the Liberals have zero track record of being able to maintain their own spending, even on the track records that we're on. Mm-hmm. Every single successive budget has shown a deteriorating deficit, a deteriorating economic situation, worse than what was projected in the quarter and year before. So there's no reason to assume that just because we're claiming a $78 million, whatever it is, deficit in the budget as of today, that we won't have be into 100, 120, $200 billion deficit this time next year, because this government has no credibility, zero credibility of being able to maintain funding. So if that's right, being able to maintain spending discipline.
Correct.
So the end result in all of that is we're already heading into some concerning territory in terms of the amount of money we're going to be spent servicing our debt. If we can't maintain discipline from here, we're going to get ourselves into debt spiral territory. Now, I understand that the argument that like, hey, we need to be deficit spending because we're in a crisis.
Yeah.
You're right. I agree with that. The problem with the Liberals is that the crisis never ends, right? We spent a lot of money on COVID, but then we never really brought our spending back into check when things got better after COVID. We weren't spending responsibly prior to COVID either. We were on a trajectory. Sure, we're in a crisis now, but what if this crisis lasts 20 years?
Or 50.
Or 50.
Yeah. Or
right.
Or if on top of what we're already dealing with, another unrelated crisis develops.
Another unrelated. Hey, what do we do if another pandemic?
I was going to say, COVID shows up 30 on top comes of this, along. Yeah.
With this on top of this $100 billion deficit. So, we're at this really precarious moment where things can get out of control for us real fast if we're not careful as a country. And the Carney's track record aside, this Liberal government has no credibility on the discipline front, and it has no credibility on its projections. I think I praised the Globe. The Globe did a really nice piece from their editorial board basically saying that the previous projections for the last 10 years of this government amount to a serial fiction. And that's correct.
The way you said praise the Globe was funny. It was like, yes, give praise to Globe.
Give praise to Globe.
You're not wrong, though. Yeah.
Well,
and also one of the things they've talked about was
like... Are we okay right now? Yes, we're okay right now. We're not good right now. We're better off than a lot of G7 countries right now. We're okay. But the underlying systemic history here suggests to me that we could wind up being very, very, very not okay very, very, very quickly on the current track we're on.
I think when I was looking at some of the just some of the fine print in the budget, like in recent years, even Trudeau, he failed at this, but they gave lip service to the idea of a declining debt to GDP ratio. Now it's a deficit to GDP ratio.
Yeah, you just keep on changing the anchors, and it looks better. So yeah, this is my concern. I just want
to ask you a question though, because. Yeah. Your column earlier this week, I think so. That's my thoughts on Carney. That's our collective thoughts on the budget. Your Carney column earlier this week was a pistol. You were fired up. What? And you, to date, as we already joked about this, but you've been the reasonable, patient one. What caused you to? I'm not going to say you've given up on Carney, because I think that's your position to take. But what got you so fired up earlier this week? Okay, so firstly, you said that you wanted to see some evidence that Carney was taking the country in the right direction within about 6 months of the election. You'd given him the 6-month mark, and you gave him an extra week for the budget. I've given him more of a year. So I don't totally rule out the possibility that I don't think that we're in dud territory right just yet. But the thing that really pissed me off was that goddamn apology. So again, we don't want to rehash this wholly because we're presuming you're more or less aware. But a couple weeks ago, Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, sends out this ad into the American market that that features Ronald Reagan's own speeches on trade in order to bake the case for trade is good. Tariffs are bad. We only use tariffs if we absolutely have to in certain circumstances. Canada and America are stronger as like an integrated trading partner than we are as individual countries that are not integrated in its trade policies. It was pretty benign as far as ads go. The Americans lost their shit. Trump stormed out, and a trade deal that was just on the verge of settling, I believe, steel and aluminum transfers between the countries was more or less abandoned in order to punish us for the terrible sin of running an ad featuring Ronald Reagan. And I'm going to try to say this nicely. As people who are very accustomed to being in the weaker position or want to do, we blamed ourselves. Rather than focus on just how fucking crazy that was for the Americans to do that, there was a lot of internal self-recrimination
especially directed toward Doug Ford. How dare you provoke the Americans? This was stupid. This was strategically dumb. The ad was not wise. Blah 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 blah. Personally, I think that tended to be indicative of a battered housewife mentality that I think Canadians generally have. Like there's a self-deprecation that is, in some cases, really unhelpful. But, you and I have discussed this at some length. We can talk about the strategic wisdom of the ad. I think that's a separate conversation. But like, whatever. We took the hit. Americans pull out of the trade deal. Moving on. Carney goes to the APEC South Summit. Carney and Trump are reportedly, doing the finger gun thing at one another. Finger guns. Yeah. So, I mean, okay, whatever. You're trying to smooth it over. I get it.
I wanted our podcast headline last week to be finger guns, but it was too obscure. But it was too obscure. It was perfect. The Line podcast, finger guns.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, something about the finger guns thing really bothered me because to me it was like,
it's a joke. You're playing around with a guy who's crushing your economy and wrecking the prosperity of your people, and you give him a wink.
Yeah. There's something about that bothered me because it was also, it's almost like Mark Carney treated his entire election campaign with dead seriousness, but dead seriousness with maybe a wink. Like maybe he was expecting all of us to be in on the joke. Like maybe he knew he was expecting us to elect him on the grounds of his rhetoric, but he knew that we knew that he wasn't really totally serious about that, right? Wink, wink, finger guns. Like there was that kind of vibe to it. So the finger guns kind of irked me a little bit. But then what really set me off was when he said he apologized to Trump for that ad. Because to me,
no.
Either your entire campaign rhetoric was a bald-faced bullshit lie, you ran on a campaign that was elbows up, and then you governed. The way that you're governing would be something that you would have condemned a conservative for if they had suggested that was the appropriate approach 6 months ago. Which to me is just totally unacceptable. To me, that's a false bill of goods. You can't govern on one tone, for lack of a better term, say that anyone who suggests that we take a more measured approach with the Americans is a traitor, and then 5 seconds after your elected, become a brown noser. Like, to me, that's dishonest, and that dishonesty pisses me off.
You wrote something in your column, and I think you caught the mood. And you caught my mood, certainly. There have been fights I've been in where I am outgunned. I'm outnumbered. And I have no way to win. And my choices are surrender and retreat, or lose with some dignity and hopefully cause the other guys a little bit of discomfort. It's not a hard choice.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
And I want to inject some subtlety into this. I want to inject some nuance into this a little bit because, look, I do understand that Carney's in a tough situation. I do understand that to some extent, we as Canadians, as the weaker partner, have to play the game. Okay, we've got to bide our time. Maybe we've got to rag the puck. I've always suggested that our best strategy was the rag the puck strategy. We got to ride them out. We have to make them think that we're taking their concerns seriously. We've got to move chess pieces across the board. But our actual strategy should be buy time, buy time, buy time. And there might be a degree of smiling and nodding. There might be a degree of that. But there's a pretty wide degree between fuck off and die in a fire. And I apologized to Trump for the terrible sin of running a Reagan ad.
I'm just looking for the middle ground between a middle finger and a finger gun.
You know what I mean? Like he could have not said anything. He could have just taken a course of dignified silence in that situation. But to choose to apologize suggests to me that basically his entire campaign really was just total bullshit. He was riling up a bunch of boomers who wanted the appearance of a fight, but not an actual fight. And, he was riling up people who wanted the kayfabe of engaging in this virtuous show of dissent against this tyrannical force, Donald Trump. But really, when it came down to it, we wanted to be comfortable. And there's something deeply hypocritical and complacent and fatal about that impulse. And I think it's going to get us as Canadians killed.
I think so too.
Either if we're not willing to fight and we're just going to bend the neck to the Americans because we don't have a choice,
then let's make the best surrender terms we can make for ourselves.
Well, let's make the best, but yeah. Also then that should have been what people were honest about during the election. And I know asking a politician for honesty during a campaign is probably a very old-fashioned thing for me to do, but I also think that politicians should be held to account when they are dishonest during campaigns. And I think that this is a demonstration of rank dishonesty. Like, look, if our economies are so integrated that effectively we can't fight back, then we need to be honest with ourselves about that. And the whole elbows up show is counterproductive and a waste of time. Then trying to fight for our own dignity and our own sovereignty is a waste of time. We should stop. Like, if we're not actually willing to fight, we should just stop and accept that, hope that the Americans will take mercy on us and accept the least damage possible. Like, if that's actually the approach, then let's just embrace the fact that that's actually the approach. But don't sit here and what's the old term? Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me that this is elbows up, that this is us being muscular, this is us defending our sovereignty, that we give a shit about being Canadian in any material sense. And then effectively, sorry about that, Trump.
Really sorry.
That was too much. We're really sorry. I'm just asking for honesty. That's all I'm asking for. Like, if we're outgunned and must surrender, then we're outgunned and we must surrender. I'm just asking us all to be honest with ourselves about the fact that we're doing that.
Or we can just burn it all down to slightly inconvenience the Americans. That's an option too.
Well, look, there's a path between these two places. I mean, you and I have made big hay on asshole nation. Yeah. I think the approach that this country has chosen is to pretend to be an asshole nation, but really to be absolutely weak. Frankly.
Oh, it's to deputize Doug to be an asshole.
Yeah, it's to and even Doug's not being a fucking asshole. Let me just be clear on that. Just give me 1 sec. Sorry, I just need to yell at Elizabeth.
Asshole parenting.
Asshole parented.
I thought your column was bang on, and I agree with it. And
I just think we need to be honest with ourselves. That's it. Well, we need to be honest with ourselves, and I think it's perfectly fair to hold Mark Carney to account for governing one way and campaigning another. I just think that's legit.
Interesting. Last point for me on this, and we'll go talk about the conservative dumpster fire. People are agreeing with you and I, because we've both had our columns this week, and people in surprising places who are still loud and proud in public in their support of Carney have been quietly signaling to me, I don't know, I got a bad feeling about this.
This isn't what we thought it was. This isn't going the way we thought it was. Which isn't to say that I feel more happy feelings about the Conservatives at present, because I don't. No. Carney deserved our ire this week. And I think it was well aimed and well timed. But the Conservatives are not filling me with a lot of joy either. So we're going to come back and discuss that, I think.
We will. We'll come back in a moment.
Subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Yeah, check us out. www.readtheline.ca. Having savaged the Liberals, hey, Conservatives, you're next. This episode is also brought to you by CPA Ontario. There's a saying, keep it simple. What's true for life is true for taxes. And while this week's historic federal budget introduced some much-needed tax measures to help spur investment and innovation, there's still more work to be done to make Canada's tax system less complex and more competitive. Just ask a chartered professional accountant. According to a recent survey, 84% of Ontario chartered professional accountants describe Canada's tax code as overly complex. They know firsthand how tax complexity diverts resources from productive economic activity, and high tax rates discourage investment and entrepreneurship. Investment and entrepreneurship that Canada needs right now. You've no doubt heard these numbers before, but they're worth repeating. Our real GDP per capita has shown virtually no improvement in 7 years, and investment per worker in Canada is less than half of the US. Complexity has a cost, and it's costing Canadians. It's time for bold action. Our sponsor, CPA Ontario, the regulator of over 105,000 chartered professional accountants, has released a report putting forward 20 bold, practical recommendations to reform Canada's tax system. Tax Reform for Growth in Canada lays out how to simplify the Income Tax Act to reduce uncertainty, complexity, and compliance costs for all Canadians so we can spend more time and money building a stronger, more resilient Canada. The federal government's 2025 budget took meaningful steps in the right direction, but more reform is needed to help Canada attract the investment and talent that will grow our economy, create jobs, and raise the standard of living for all Canadians. Visit cpaontario.ca/tax reform to learn more. All right, Conservatives, are you ready? Jen, this is a week where the Liberals should not look great. I don't think their budget is widely loved. They've been sliding in the polls a little bit. It seems to be stabilizing a bit. National horse race numbers haven't moved. The Conservatives have a ton of ammunition here. How did the Conservatives end up actually looking incompetent this week, even against the government? The government announces an almost $80 billion deficit, but you want to know which leader is having speculation about his survival? It's not the Prime Minister. It's Pierre Poilievre, who is now down 2 MPs compared to a week ago. So one's crossed the floor. The other has just freaking quit.
Okay. So again, just to get into the technical nitty gritty, prior to the budget, Mark Carney's Liberals were down 3 seats, right?
There were 3 off a majority.
3 off a majority, which is really narrow, particularly when you talk about the speaker as well. So really, really close to not having. There was a possibility, not a high probability, but there was a possibility that this budget would not have been able to pass the floor of the House of Commons. And if that were the case, that would be effectively a non-confidence motion that would force the government to fall, and we'd be back in an election. However, I don't know what the final numbers of the budget. We didn't think that was a high probability because there was probably a pretty good chance that enough of the opposition was either going to stay home or abstain that the budget would get a narrow majority.
They would sleep in that day and oops, the budget passed.
Yeah, exactly, because nobody really wants an election right now. But it was a really high stakes moment for a couple of hours there, particularly when we got a Conservative floor crosser. I don't really want to get into the age-old argument about whether crossing the floor is ethical or whether or not it should be done in a by-election. And yes, I know that people tend to elect parties and not individual MPs. But look, in the system that we're in, you actually aren't electing your party. You're electing your MP to represent you. The MP just happens to be attached to a party.
Yeah, that MP can change their mind.
And an MP can change their mind, and an MP can cross the floor to another party to support another party if he feels that that's in the best interest of his constituents, and in most cases in the best interest of himself. And this happens, and it has a long tradition in Westminster parliamentary systems. It is not a sign of things being broken. Actually, MPs aren't really supposed to be
beholden to parties. Man.
Yeah, they're not actually supposed to be houseplants. They're actually supposed to be human beings who are elected as representatives of their communities. So
we might be better off.
So the idea that the MPs all have some kind of moral obligation to sit in tow with the party that they were elected under, I realize in practice that's how it works. But in theory, that's actually not how it should work. MPs actually should be very empowered in our system, and they often aren't. More to do with history and psychological forces than actual legal ones. But yeah, anyway, so we got a floor crosser whose name is eluding me for some reason because I'm
Chris d'Entremont.
Chris d'Entremont. Thank you very much.
Brought the number. Sorry, we all have the spark of the divine, but for our purposes, he actually is a number, not a person. He's the 170th Liberal MP out of the needed 172.
There you go. And then, of course, I apologize. I did know your name, Mr. d'Entremont. The problem, of course, is that I'm trying to parent and podcast at the same time. I deserve some credit for that. Then, of course, rumors started to fly around that Généraux was going to cross the floor. And there was a lot of gossip going on about that. And we have to be careful about exactly what kind of gossip we're willing to replay here. But Généraux puts out this very interesting and very weirdly written resignation letter that says that he is going to resign his seat next spring, probably. He's not crossing the floor, and he has full support and faith in the leadership of Pierre Poilievre, who, of course, is the opposition leader. But there was something about the way that letter was written that spoke of fear to me.
Please leave my family alone.
Please leave my family alone was literally the entry to that resignation letter. And there were rumors that when the gossip mill started to run, that Genero was going to cross, there were rumors that pressure was placed on him and that the Conservative Party was putting pressure on any iffy candidates that essentially you cross and we'll start leaking on you. We'll hurt you. So like I won't get into the specific rumors of what the dirt was on Genero, but that was the goss. I'm not going to give gossip the credibility of certainty. I don't know if this is true. It's just gossip. And certainly the public statements that have come out ever since have been very, we support Poilievre, we support Genero, we support blah, 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 blah. They've been very generically supportive. I don't think it's a coincidence that you had someone like Genero threaten to, announce his resignation as this budget drama is playing out. The timing of that should be indicative, if nothing else. And I just think, if it's just kind of ironic here that you've got the Liberals the nickname I had for Mark Carney was Technocratic Daddy. I think my nickname for him now is Carney McWeekpants. And
Technocrat Daddy is something that was actually in my mind when I was writing my column, right? Because
but he ain't coming across as a real strong, credible, forceful presence in Canadian moral leadership at the moment. And rather than being able to take advantage of that, you've got Pierre Poilievre not coming across as like credible, strong moral alternative, but rather, well, I could have gotten a better deal from the Americans by now.
My favorite part. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You finish your sentence.
And I'm just no, you can't even keep your caucus together, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, with what leverage are you going to get a deal with the Americans? Really? With what offer?
I was teasing a buddy of mine.
You're on board with the Reagan ad was too mean to the Americans, but I'm sure they're going to take you real serious.
I was teasing a buddy of mine just a few days ago because I was reminding him of we were teenagers and we were walking, and this is important. We were walking to the movie theater. And as we were going, he was telling me at length about this girl he thought had a crush on him and he could totally get her. Oh yeah, I can get her number. I can get her to go on a date. I could totally get her. As we're walking, because he couldn't get the car that night, I just looked at him like, he couldn't even get the car. That's why we're walking. And I'm looking at Poilievre being like, yeah, no, I'm the guy who's going to represent Canada. You're also the guy who's lost 2 MPs in a week. And I'm not making any bets, but I can guarantee you there's others who are on the fence. And there have been other really weird things happening at the CPC this week. My favorite, and I'm sorry, it's just some potted plant backbencher whose name I'm totally blanking on, put out this bizarre loyalty video to Poilievre or I watched it once, but it was, hello, I am faithful Conservative MP, and I have full faith in Pierre Poilievre as being the right man to lead Canada. Thank you. And clearly there is dissension in that caucus. I know that the Liberals have a target list of MPs they've been working on. I don't know how many they're going to get. They got at least one, and they seem to have perhaps knocked at least one out of the running. Couple of interesting things to note, though, is that the Liberals did think Genero was coming across the floor. So that seems to have been a game time decision on the part of the outgoing MP to resign instead of crossing the floor. The other thing I would say, well, to state the obvious, all of this looks bad on Poilievre. This is not a good week for the opposition leader.
Look, again, don't want to assume that gossip is fact. Okay, so I want to be careful. But if your only answer to keeping your caucus together is the most heavy-handed threats, that's not that's not indicating to me that you have the most subtle grasp of leadership and let's say the dynamics of cohesion.
Well, let me be blunt here. I'm going to be very blunt. You know what Pierre Poilievre had going for him the last couple of years? The certainty of victory. People were willing to overlook a lot because they wanted to be on a short list for cabinet or a diplomatic posting or whatever. Every time, either by resignation or a floor crossing, Mark Carney inches closer to a majority. And right now, he's only effectively, at least for the purposes of this budget, if Genero stops showing up at the House, Carney's one vote off. If the Liberals can knock one or two more MPs from any party out into their column, it's over.
Yeah.
Poilievre does not have the prospect of imminent patronage to hand out anymore. Yeah. You're not going to, if you're a conservative MP and you're pissed off at Poilievre, he can't dangle a cabinet position in front of you on a 3-year horizon. Yeah. He can't tell you he's making you ambassador to Barbados or whatever, or some nice country with a nice beach. What Poilievre is left with to hold his caucus together are his political skills and his interpersonal skills, which, just to recap, this is a guy who's even his top supporters seem to think he's a jackass, and he lost his own seat and seemed to be surprised. So it's not a great position for him to be in. And you want to know the weirdest part of this, Jen? Have you seen the official lines the Conservatives are using to explain Genero's resignation? So he's an Alberta MP. Mm-hmm. He has announced his resignation, and the party is saying it's fine. He moved to Victoria a while ago and was always planning on quitting soon. What the fuck is he doing in an Alberta seat then?
Well, that's a fair point. And look, I think that there were the rumors that he was on his way out and really was considering running in the last election. I think that that's probably true.
Don't run people who want to quit so they can move to a different province.
And also, it's not like Alberta should be it's a pretty good seat. Anyway, look, I wanted to bring up one comment I wanted to bring up one comment from a Conservative MP. And the reason why I want to bring up this comment is further to the train of all of these weird cryptic loyalty statements are now starting to come out. Cryptic loyalty statements are not something that tend to come out when your leadership is doing great. All right. When people feel the need to publicly affirm how loyal they are to you, it's usually the thing that I read between the lines is not public affirmation of loyalty. The thing that I read between the lines is people are feeling the need to publicly affirm their loyalty to you because the loyalty is under question or under strain for some reason.
The more he spoke of his honor, the faster we counted our spoons.
There you go. So I wanted to point out this a very interesting little tweet by Mark Dalton, who is an MP from Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, who I used to live there as a kid, so, represent. Mark Dalton is not necessarily a household name by any stretch. He's not a particularly well-known MP. But I wanted to read this particular tweet to you because, Matt, to me, this sums up the general state of the conservative movement right now. So I'm going to watch your facial expression while I read this. So from Mark Dalton, MP on Twitter, or X, quote, just putting this out there. Pierre Poilievre is an amazing leader. I am honored and inspired to be a Conservative MP under him. If not for the unfortunate and helpful comments about Canada becoming the 51st state during the last election, our nation would be under his capable and astute prime ministerialship, and our nation would be moving in a very positive course. As it stands, we've just been saddled with the biggest deficit in Canadian history outside of COVID, and our economy is tanking. Meanwhile, the Liberals are having a happy, clappy, good old time, oblivious to the stagnation and pain they're inflicting. Matt, I'm going to repeat one sentence here.
I'm going to say, speaking of happy, clappy.
If not for the unfortunate and unhelpful comments about Canada becoming the 51st state during the last election, if not for those unfortunate and helpful comments about Canada becoming a 51st state under the last election, Matt, I swear to God, that sentence has literally eaten a hole in my brain.
You know what that sentence is? That sentence gives up the game. That sentence tells you with 100% certainty how Pierre Poilievre is rationalizing this to himself.
If not for the giant comet that was about to hurtle through the Earth's atmosphere, destroying our country utterly, right now we'd all be living in a subtropical climate. If not for that, Matt, if not for the giant tidal wave that came up across the shore and swamped the city of Vancouver to the sea,
my feet would be dry.
If not for that unhelpful tidal wave.
If not for the unfortunate events in Dallas that day, President Kennedy would have had a terrific November.
So,
God, that was dark. Sorry, I don't know why I immediately went to Dealey Plaza, but
it's not unexpected. But like,
that's groveling. Like, that's pathetic. Like,
well, the groveling is not even the thing that gets to me, because he's a backbench MP. Who cares? But the groveling, the thing that gets to me is like, did you not see as like responding to the comet from Earth as being part of your job, and maybe your failure to respond to the giant comet hurtling from Earth as being part of the reason why maybe you didn't win?
I was telling my conservative friends during the last election that a fundamental problem Poilievre had was that he never hesitated to bare his teeth at anyone.
Yeah, except Donald Trump.
So Trudeau, cuckoo, Singh, wacko, random newspaper editors eat the apple, munch on it, and show them contempt.
I'll take that that basically nobody Kamloops reporter down. You watch me.
Showed anger and contempt. Everything was tailored for the social media own. And then Donald Trump comes along and like nukes our entire economy. And what was, I'm trying to remember what Poilievre actually said. Knock it off. Is that what he actually came? Oh, come on, Donald, knock it off.
Those comments are very unhelpful.
The only person Pierre Poilievre ever sounded deferential to was Donald Trump.
If not for those unfortunate and helpful comments about Canada becoming the 51st state during the last election.
Darn, they were unhelpful.
Unhelpful and unfortunate. If not for those unhelpful and unfortunate comments that you were completely unable to respond to or pivot to appropriately in any way whatsoever, which in and of itself probably disqualified you, or in the minds of at least a significant number of Canadians, disqualified you from becoming a quote unquote capable and astute prime ministerial ship. If not for those unfortunate and unhelpful comments, if not for the unfortunate and unhelpful reality that the country actually has to face in the fantasy version that I've created in my head, we'd be doing great right now.
Groveling always tells you something about the person being flattered. It's a signal as to where they need to have their ego stroked. Ego was not the first word that came to mind.
He's just a victim of circumstance, Matt.
Yeah, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Yep. Anyway, so look, who knows? The leadership race for the Conservative leader is coming up in a couple of months. He's lost 2. He's still got a bunch more. I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was 140-ish. Like he had a bigger caucus. They were able to grow the caucus. The Conservatives actually had, like, if not for the defeat, they actually had a pretty good election last year in terms of raising the floor, getting more candidates. I was thinking about this because I don't know how many more Poilievre can lose without having a real political problem, because I think every MP he loses kind of lowers the threshold for that next unhappy one to leave. And I think the Liberals, like I said, they have a list. They know who they're targeting. It might actually be, in a weird way, a credit to Poilievre that he's only lost 2 so far, because I think the Liberals are putting a lot of pressure on.
You can't blame Poilievre for losing his MPs, if not for the unhelpful and unhelpful attempts by the Liberals to court his MPs across the floor. He wouldn't have had to threaten anybody. I mean, allegedly.
I've said it before, Jen. I'll say it again, and then I think I'll shut up. Poilievre was a perfectly evolved and adapted Justin Trudeau defeating machine. And he did it. He drove Trudeau out of politics with his tail between his legs and destroyed several of his signature achievements. Meanwhile, Trudeau's hooked up with an astonishingly attractive pop star, and Poilievre's losing his caucus.
If not for that unfortunate and unhelpful circumstance wherein Justin Trudeau quits and Mark Carney takes over the leadership of the leader of the Liberal Party, Pierre Poilievre would be prime minister right now. It was very unfortunate and unhelpful that Justin Trudeau did that for him.
Okay. Good job, everybody.
Good job, everyone. Nothing to be learned here. Just keep on doing this. This is working great for you.
And remember, it's not a big deal that General quit, because he planned on quitting soon and moving to a different province anyway. And that's why we ran him in Alberta, a province where it's really hard to find other people to run in seats.
For the Conservative Party.
For the Conservatives,
hey,
yeah.
And please just leave General's family alone. This is all very unhelpful.
Yeah.
It's all very unhelpful and unfortunate.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. We'll leave it at that. www.readtheline.ca. I need to go scream into a pillow for a minute, but we'll be back. I think I'm going to shut up in this segment because Jen wants to talk a bit with us about feminism. And it's a sort of like Jen saying, hey, do you want to take a walk in the minefield? And all the mines are calibrated to explode at your weight, but not mine. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
And classically,
all right, tell me about feminism, Jen.
We also are getting like my daughter's narrativization in the background, so that we're just going to allow that to do its thing. She's actually very cute, so it's fun. So yeah, I'm mostly bringing this up because I've been looking through the oeuvre of Ross Douthat for a reason. Ross Douthat is a columnist at the New York Times. I am scheduled to interview Ross in a couple of weeks in Ottawa. So I will be in town in Ottawa for a couple of days to do that. And I'm kind of going through the back catalog, just sort of like familiarizing myself with some stuff. By the way, if you at the line have any questions that you would like me to throw at Mr. Douthat, please send me a note, jen@readtheline.ca. Happy to take any inquiries or questions that you may have for him and throw them at him for this segment. Yes, do my job for me. That's what I'm opening up the floor for. So as I was going through Ross Douthat's back catalog, so to speak, I ran into a interview that recently he did between Helen Andrews and Leah Libresco-Sargent. Both of them are kind of conservative female writers. Helen Andrews has become quite well known, I think, in the last few weeks for writing about essentially, I think the thesis of her argument is that woke was a reflection of the feminization of institutions. Obviously, very controversial position. There is I'll get into this later. And you had Leah Libresco-Sargent, who herself is a pretty conservative writer, but comes at it from a very different perspective, talking about that particular essay. And you had Ross Douthat in the middle, in the best possible position between two women, moderating them. But he actually did a really good job. I actually thought of steering and managing the conversation. Although I do wonder whether or not a man was the best suited to moderate that particular discussion.
Ladies.
And like there were definitely some moments of that discussion where it was like, am I listening to this in 2025 or 1965? Because like some of the energy here was very 1965. But anyway, like it was actually a very interesting conversation, and maybe we'll link to it at the bottom if you have a chance, check it out. But it really got me thinking, because I think that I'm now, after listening to that, inspired to write my own response to Helen Andrews's feminization thesis. Because I think there is a conversation that's happening, particularly among conservative and more conservative women, about how should I say this? I think many of us, or most of us, would consider ourselves feminists in the classic sense, in the sense that, yes, I believe that I'm equal to men and should have equal, liberties and rights and opportunities to men. Absolutely. But there's also a side conversation around that. And that is, but beyond that, I think there's a real disparity between where conservative women and much more liberal women are positioning themselves in terms of different and specific cultural issues. Leah Libresco-Sargent, I think, did a very good job articulating, I think, pretty close to where I am on this, in that saying one of the mistakes that we've made is assuming that we could only attain equality if we were regarded as the same. And men and women do deserve equal liberty, equality, and opportunity. But that equality and opportunity has to be rooted in an understanding that fundamentally we're not biologically or psychologically the same. Our equality has to be rooted in a respect for our complementary natures and our differences. And we have to be able to have a conversation about the ways in which we're not the same without devolving that conversation into crude stereotypes about men and women. Like, we have to be able to acknowledge that on the whole, we are a dimorphic species. We are fundamentally different in some crucial ways between men and women at a statistical level, a measurable statistical level. And let's take something benign like height. If you were to track male and female height on a graph, you're going to see two humps that overlap each other. But just because that happens to be true on most things we can measure does not mean that you can draw from that any specific conclusion about individual men or individual women. Men tend to be taller than women. That doesn't mean that any individual woman won't be taller than any individual man. So you can't be making sort of broad assumptions about the capabilities or trajectories of any particular woman based on the fact that women tend to share a cluster of traits, just as men tend to share a cluster of traits. And that fundamental misunderstanding between statistical reality and individual reality is, I think, where we run into a lot of problems of communication on these issues, right? But anyway, it was a really interesting conversation. And I think that a reason why I'm interested to write an essay response to it is because I think I take some pretty significant issue to the idea that the woke phenomenon is fundamentally a result of feminization. It's not to say that I don't think that there isn't some overlap or correlation between the influx of women in institutions and the normalization of certain kinds of behavior and communication patterns. I think that's probably so. If it weren't, then, and we were just all the same, and then we would expect no differences. But I don't think that we're the same. But where I think that this particular analysis goes off the rails is where it falls into the trap of assuming that the woke phenomenon can be explained by gender politics as opposed to class analysis. Yep. And I think that it's not that there's not a correlation there isn't something there. I think there is something there. But I think that a lot of what we define as the woke phenomenon is better understood by class than it is by gender. So I think I'm puttering around with that essay idea in my head, and also puttering around with the idea that the word woke means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. If you talk to more progressive people and you say woke, what they're thinking is, well, we believe in equality. And we believe in the pursuit of equality between genders, sexes, and races. And I'm like, yeah, on board. When conservative people are talking about woke, they're talking about a totally different thing. They're talking about the use of illiberal tactics to shut down all dissent on all issues in order to enforce and conform a kind of progressive orthodoxy on the culture. So we're talking about different things, and I think we need to be very precise in what we mean when we use the word woke. But yeah, I have some real concerns with, how should I say this? Attributing wokeness to some kind of stereotype of feminine behavior that is maybe not totally unrooted in reality, but isn't reflective of any individual reality. And also, I just think that, as I said, a class analysis, and particularly the what I would call the overproduction of elite thesis, explains a lot of what was happening with that phenomenon way more than gender politics does.
I'm going to explain in a minute the elite overproduction thesis, because it's something I've been looking at years. But first, can you take a minute and explain what was it Helen Andrews, the name?
Yeah.
What was her essay? You've mentioned that it roots woke and feminization. Just take that a couple sentences deeper. What is her thesis?
So just to be clear, it's the title is called The Great Feminization by Helen Andrews, and it was published in Compact magazine. And I think it's actually been very influential in conservative circles. And I hear a lot of conservative women talking about it, which is why I kind of want to weigh in on this. But this essentially says that, woke wasn't a flash in the pan. Woke was the consequence of a series of demographic shifts, namely the feminization of institutions. So more women have been attending and graduating university. You have more and more women in what were traditionally sort of higher status, white collar jobs in media, in culture. All of these institutions have been taken over by women. Fewer and fewer men are operating in these spaces. And as a result, wokeness is a kind of a reflection of a feminized pattern of aggression and communication. So her thesis essentially is that men tend to operate a little bit more according to a warrior military aesthetic, where there's clear hierarchies, there's clear processes for dealing with conflicts. Women have more of a tendency to gossip, backbite, and engage in sort of non-virtuous or toxic feminine behavior. And that woke is essentially toxic feminine behavior taken to an extraordinary extreme. I think there are a lot of problems with this thesis. The first is the idea that woke is feminine. I mean, if I look at the BLM riots or the Antifa riots or the responses to George Floyd, I don't see a particularly feminized response there. So like you're kind of cherry picking what you're considering woke and not woke in order to fit the thesis, which I think is one of the major flaws with it. Secondly, I mean, what came up in this New York Times interview is that Helen Andrews was able to explain sort of masculine virtues and masculine vices in very general terms, but she wasn't really able or willing to explain that she was able to talk about feminine vices, but not really feminine virtues in any meaningful sense. Like, our workplaces, are they benefit at all by having women participate in any capacity in the workforce? Reading this essay, you'd kind of come away thinking like, wow, women in the workforce is a bad thing. They don't bring anything at all to the table except problems and dysfunction.
Look at all the chaos you've caused.
And all the chaos we've got, the feminine chaos we've caused. So I don't think that that's true. I think having women in workforces has been overall an extraordinary boon both to the economy and to workforces. I think we collectively bring value, okay? Which is not to say that women don't have stereotypically toxic traits and that we can't have an honest conversation about that. I think we should be able to have an honest conversation about that too. And every woman I know will privately have conversations about toxic feminine traits. It is a thing. It's a thing that we should talk about. But I don't think of woke as being necessarily feminine. I think that her thesis falls apart I think there's something to it. I think there's something worth discussing there. But as I said, I think that the stronger lens by which to understand the phenomenon is the class analysis, not the gendered one.
I agree with you.
I'm preparing everybody for another totally non sequitur essay that has nothing to do with Canadian politics, because I know our readers love it when I do that.
You know what? It's not disconnected from Canadian politics, and I don't agree with the Andrews thesis either. And I'm with you more on class and social forces, and I'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things that we are looking at, just as data points, Andrews isn't wrong that in certain key institutions and even sectors, female workforce participation has grown to the point where it is now a majority. And she's also not wrong that we are seeing, and this is trackable, I'm not saying anything controversial here, there's always been a political divergence between men and women. It's widening. And if you look at younger generations, and some of this might get normaled out a little bit with the passage of time, but the polls show us that the median woman in any age bracket and the median man on any age bracket, the gap between them politically is getting bigger. And this has all kinds of really interesting ramifications. You've probably read some of these essays about young women going, I can't find anyone to marry in my age group because their political views are either abhorrent to me or they have failed to launch. So I do think there's stuff that's happening and we should be looking at that. But I want to take just even 30 seconds here and tell you, well, but tell the listeners, you mentioned, Jen, elite overproduction. This is a really interesting thesis. And I read it for the first time a couple of years ago in a book by Peter Turchin. He's an American academic. And the idea of elite overproduction, I'm going to simplify this, right? In any society, you only have so many positions of actual power. And that can be political power. Like the United States has a president, a vice president, a dozen or two cabinet ministers, and then you've got 100 senators and 435 House reps. And then you've got your state houses and municipal governments. But it's actually a finite list of political positions in the United States where you can hold actual power. There are also softer positions. There's business leadership, cultural leadership, social leadership. Sure. But again, it's a pretty finite number of positions in any society. Turchin was saying that a healthy society has different identifiable factions. And when one faction is in ascendance, they have roughly enough elite people to fill those positions. Where societies become unhealthy, he said, is when within factions, the factions themselves have gotten so big. Hypothetically, you've got 500 important jobs in a country, and your right-wing conservative party has 1,500 would-be aspiring elites who want them. What that sets up is internal tribal battles.
And you've definitely seen that, for example, in academia, which is radically overproduced PhD candidates, and there just simply is nowhere near enough jobs for them. So what's happened within these institutions is they've become much more politically radicalized. And the reason why they've become more politically radicalized is because you have more and more people competing for attention and opportunities to advance within the institutions. Same thing happened with newsrooms, for example, right?
Oh yeah.
So we've seen this overproduction thesis bear out. The more competition and more insecurity you have among these potential elites for a relatively small number of jobs, the more vicious and tribal these internecine fights start to become.
And it pushes people to extremes.
Which pushes people further and further and further to extremes. And it also pushes, ironically, also more and more and more conformity. You can't be the one person who's the problem in the room when there are fewer and fewer opportunities. I mean, this is just what it is. So you
also can't be a mushy moderate when there's 3 people who want your job and they're all at the vanguard of like a social movement. I'm an experienced professional. I'm really good at my job. And there's 3 guys who want that job. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm here for social justice. Oh yeah, well, I'm here representing the victims. If you don't have something to defend yourself,
a selling
with.
point, something you can commodify. So at a very minimum, what it means is those people who aren't at the vanguard or who maybe have reservations about the incoming ideology wind up silencing themselves because they know that they can't risk being on the outs with the ascendant power or the ascendant movement. And the people who tend to get the most airtime and most ability to get ahead are the ones who can position themselves with the biggest marketing potential in a highly over-competitive field, right? So that, I think, dynamic actually explains a lot more about what happened in the last 5 years than saying
left and right too. Like with the weird factions of the Republican Party have completely displaced the classical Republicans. The elites just swapped out.
100%. Now, where I think there might be a gendered aspect to this is that a lot of the overproduction of the elites are disproportionately female. Mm-hmm. Because, again, this is just a reflection of more women of higher education coming through higher education. So that's possibly it. But I think that tribalism and overproduction of elite thesis, it goes a lot further away to explaining what happened here than men versus women. Yeah. That being said, there is something wrong with what's happening about the dynamic of men versus women. And I do think that there's what I would call modern post-woke intersectional feminism has normalized a kind of shitting on men and masculine virtues in a way that's not helpful, because I think in a healthy human society, men and women need each other, and men and women both bring complementary features and traits to a particular table. I mean, even my husband and I, like, in some areas he takes lead, in some areas I take lead, and we trade off, right? In some areas I'm the dominant partner, in some areas he's the dominant partner, and we trade off. That is a healthy dynamic. And those ways in which we trade off are pretty gendered, to break it to you. That doesn't mean that we're not equal, nor does that mean that we're not equal partners, nor does that mean that I'm subservient to him. It means that we're complementary. And the ways that, like, I don't want my husband to not be a man, nor do I want him to be feminized. I don't want him to feel like he has to demasculinize himself, or that he can't be a strong masculine presence in my life and my children's lives. I want him to be these things. These are good qualities, so long as they don't take on their toxic, negative, and non-virtuous forms. In the same way, like, he's not interested in being married to like a highly androgynous masculine. That doesn't do it for him. He wants to be married to a woman, and I'm very much a woman, right? But
and what a woman.
And what a woman. But just so long as I don't allow, the worst aspects of my personality to take the wheel at all times. We both work at sort of exemplifying our respective virtues in line with what we bring to the table. And we have a very harmonious relationship. Well, for the most part, not always, but we, for the most part, have a very harmonious relationship.
No one bats
a thousand. That's what I think that all of us should be striving for in accordance to our own individual gifts and talents, right?
So I'm going to assign you some homework. So you want to write an essay about this. Did you read, and this is a few years ago now, I'm going to have to go into the Google machine. Do you remember the Christine Estima? I think that's her name, the Washington Post columnist. Her essay a few years ago about toxic masculinity and feminism.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago. I'd have to go review it.
So for the benefit of the audience, one of the things that I think this is something Jen and I have talked about this before. Stuff like Jordan Peterson found a ready audience with so many young men, because for the last 30 or 40 years, men, particularly young ones, have been told, don't be toxic males. And we go, okay, so what are we supposed to be? Not toxic. Thank you. Can you help at all? Can you tell me what you actually specifically don't want me to be doing? Can you tell me what I should be doing? No, don't be toxic. And one of the things, I think, again, I hope I have her name right. I think it's Estima. She's a self-identified progressive feminist writer. She polled a bunch of her female friends and colleagues about kind of what the ideal male is. Like, what is the post-toxic male? And then she kind of did like a little bit of a composite of like everything she'd heard and created like an idealized male according to the progressive feminists. Then she went back to all the women who had contributed to the composite and described the kind of man they'd come up with. And it's like, would you date this man? And they're like, no. And I just think when I see stats like, and this is something astonishing, and there was a number floating around about this just this week, but like a shockingly high percentage of young American men have never asked a woman on a date.
Yeah, it's a problem. There's a very significant problem.
It's showing up in other social indicators. Date of first marriage delaying, date of first sexual intercourse is moving back. Number of romantic partners. All of these things are tanking. It's like the sexes just don't want to talk to each other. So I'm sure that'll be fine.
No, look, we need each other. We need each other in order to build families, to carry the humanity forward, to be healthy, happy individuals. Like, my life is not better if I eliminate the men from it. And my men's lives wouldn't be better if they didn't have women and my presence in their lives. We need each other. This is what human society is. We need each other. Anyway, I'll just take off this note is that, like, I think that it's become a bit of a cliche at this point for women among themselves to be, even highly progressive liberal women, to be wary about self-proclaimed feminist men. And is that it's not that we love the Joe Rogan bros. We don't. But I mean, I shouldn't say we here. I've been out of the dating pool for a good long while, and thank God for it. But like, everyone kind of knows that the really strongly self-identified feminist man is bit of a yellow flag, because a lot of those men are actually predatory. They're engaging in the performance of feminism in order to put women off their guard, in order to engage in subtle sort of manipulative behavior. It's a bit like the anglerfish, you know what I mean, who steals the mate away. There's a little bit of that going on. And among women, we talk about predatory feminist men, or men who are performatively feminist, and how often they're actually creeps. I would say there's a contrapoint to this. If you want to say like yin and yang, that's like the little white or black dot in the white. The yang to that is the anti-feminist woman, and the anti-feminist woman is a bit of a pick-me girl, right? Especially the anti-feminist intellectual pick-me girl is what I would call. There is a class of women who knows that she will always find a very ready audience by shitting on her own gender in order to gain a crumb of respect from men who will never see her as an equal. There is an actual vacuum that is filled by women like this. And I don't want to be one of those women, but it's an interesting dynamic. And I wonder to what extent this Helen Andrews' motivations and essays are rooted in this impulse where she understands that, look, a woman who's willing to just shit on all women is always going to find an audience among men who are misogynists, whether they want to admit it to themselves or not. Like, there's always going to be an audience for that woman, right? So I want to be able to take this argument apart on its intellectual merits and to grant it credit where I think it has some merit. But I do think there's a little bit of that going on here.
Yeah, and I know you have a hard out coming up. You've got another interview to do after this one.
Gosh, yes, like in 1 minute, exactly.
So what I will say in 10 seconds is the older I get, the more sad I become about how much of human everything, society, civilization, entrepreneurship, all of it seems to be rooted in loneliness and rejection.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just a really interesting thing. Like, I'm up in my early 40s, edging into my mid 40s now, and I look around at people I've known for 25 years, and they're still nursing grudges and broken hearts from 25 years ago. And gosh, it's that those patterns they probably aren't consciously aware of it, but they bring that energy into every relationship. So, okay. And then we scale that up and we create movements, and then we storm the Capitol.
Great.
Things are going really well.
Things are going great. On that note, anyway, I'm just chewing on some ideas for an essay. That one will come out when it comes out. And if you have any questions for Ross to that, please send me a note. That's jen@readtheline.ca. And on that note, I do have to go.
Everybody, readtheline.ca. Check us out there. Like and subscribe. We will talk with you soon. Have a great weekend. Take good care.